second.
I guess I gotta hit got it. It says this meeting is being live streamed. There we go.
Second. All right. All right, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Model Talk Tuesdays. I am a lady named Pearl, the founder of a Lady Named Pearl Leadership Academy, and we have an amazing guest with us today. We're actually talking about a topic that's new to us at Model Talk Tuesdays, which is fashion illustration. So please help me welcome the esteemed, the wonderful, amazing Professor Steven Broadway. If I had some side effects, yes, I would give these hand claps. And today, you all, yes, students, we are going to refer to him as Professor B-Way.
Yes.
So Professor B-Way, before we get into your expertise of fashion illustration, I like to go back to the beginning and get to know the person before the craft came in. So could you tell us, where were you born? Where's your family from? What is your foundation in terms of culture?
Yeah, it's always nice to review the roots. So I'm originally from Nepal, which is a tiny little country nestled in between India and China in the Himalayan mountains. So I'm very landlocked, a tiny little country. We were so in such a high elevation and surrounded by mountains that we weren't even really open for aircraft travel until the mid-50s. So we were living in pretty much isolation, and occasionally very ambitious mountain climbers would land up there to take on Mount Everest and other smaller mountains. So that is the origins of my roots. I come from a family of 5. So I have like 2 brothers, 2 sisters, and then they were born like 2 years apart. So they grew up as a unit. I came 15 years after the last.
You're special.
I was the surprise baby, very late to the party. But what I got to do was have a front row seat into the lives of the cool teens. And who were rocking the 60s. They were just with the, wraparound sunglasses, all the fashions. So I got a front row seat to the lives of young people. And I happen to come from, my siblings were all very much into style and fashion at that time. And seeing them in action and their friends, because I guess fashion attracts fashion. So it was this whole community of people who were very style savvy and art savvy and music savvy. So it was very much that kind of population. And as a child, I was naturally attracted to drawing, like almost 99% of children are. At some point, children veer off and they stop drawing or expressing themselves in that way. I had my teeth in it from day one, and it wouldn't let up until I was able to come to New York to go to Parsons School of Design for illustration.
Well, let's stop there, Mr. Professor B-Way, and thank you for that colorful visual. I see a town, a city nestled in between mountains.
Yes.
And for me, I also was a child that was the last of 8, actually.
Wow,
and I came 12 years later, and
goodness,
I had a similar experience where I saw my sisters putting on makeup, putting on bras, headed out to the clubs. But I also felt like it was a blessing because I learned so much from their mistakes, from their journey, from
absolutely, they were built-in instructors. You had 7 of them, so that's like a lot of teaching. We're not even getting to mom and dad, who are teachers in their own right.
Yes. So I feel us being in those positions, we got so much. So you said that your siblings were into fashion, and that's what got you into fashion. And you kept pushing that pencil, that pen. Middle school, high school, were you the art geek?
I was the art kid. My family also traveled. Part of my family worked for the American Embassy. So we traveled and lived all over the world. So it was
Okay.
like every 2 to 3 years, it was like, you got to make friends really fast because you're not here for a long time. And as I was telling my students last week in class for summer school, my priority, my main goal was to always meet the art teacher in whatever city we were going to be setting up camp for the next 2 or 3 years, and make sure that I had a good connection with them and they were going to provide me with one-on-one mentorship. So I wasn't interested in the French teacher, the math teacher, the science teacher, the athletics department. I wanted to get to the art teacher right away and make sure that, they were going to support me. And it always worked out because as I have been an art teacher for many decades, it's so exciting to meet a kid who reminds you of you at that age, because they want nothing else. They want art, they want design, they're expressing their creativity through drawing and painting and sculpture and whatnot. But the art kid, and that's what gives you your confidence. I think it's harder when a young person hasn't found something to get their teeth in. And I think it can be concerning for parents because our world is so full of so many different things one can aspire to that it's kind of hard to imagine if a kid hasn't found something. There's more and more choices every day, it seems like. And now with digital technology, that's a world completely unto itself, which is very exciting. So they can operate in the world of the digital age and go after so many different fields,
Yes.
where you navigate.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Definitely. That's very important for the young people that are tuning in. Welcome to Model Talk Tuesdays, Victoria and Bria. I see you all in the comments. Miss Professor B-Way can't see it, but I will deliver any questions that you all have. And I'm in total agreement with him that our young people definitely need to find something to get their teeth into. And then the other pearl of wisdom that he gave to the young people is that even though he traveled multiple places, he always found his art teacher or his art community to feed into him. Now we're at this esteemed Parsons school in New York. Tell us, for those of us that are not in New York and maybe not fashion heads, what makes Parsons so great, and how were you able to get in?
Well, it was submitting my portfolio as all students do. Every school asked for some specifics in what they want to see, just to kind of gauge where you are artistically, but also intellectually, your curiosity, your character. So, I submitted what I was asked to submit, and, I was lucky enough to be accepted. I applied to the Rhode Island School of Design, Parsons, and one school out west called the Art Center College of Design, which is in Pasadena, which is outside of Los Angeles. So those are the three schools. I got accepted to all three. But everybody who kept meeting me overseas and knowing me and getting a sense of what I would want kept pushing for New York, because in America, New York is the fashion capital. There's no denying it. So they're like, if you're going to study design in America, it has to be New York, because that's where the business is. That's where you're going to make your contacts, your network, your education, your support is going to be there. I didn't really want to come to New York because, those scary Martin Scorsese gangster movies, I was like, it looks like a little bit of a rough town for me. I really want to be in California because I want to learn to surf. I want to, get on a skateboard. I want to get on a bicycle on Venice Beach. I don't want to have to duck gunfire, But once I got to New York, whatever I thought would kind of hinder me or alarm me, none of it happened. I got caught in the wave of people who are so passionate about pursuing whatever they're pursuing that they don't really have time to watch what you're pursuing because they're trying to get their game on. So it was great to be around, to be in a community, in a city where people are just ruled by ambition and drive and creativity and networking. And it was so alive. So I didn't have one regret. Though I have to say, I did have friends the first year of school, the first few months of school, They came maybe from smaller towns, but Manhattan was not for them. It was too intense, too busy, too many choices, too many distractions, and they couldn't focus on school. So their parents came, I remember, at the dorms and pack them up and off they went. It was not
Oh
the place for
man.
them. They could have loved the school, but the city was overwhelming for them.
It reminds me of like a reality show, an elimination reality show.
Absolutely,
I was
absolutely.
watching RuPaul's Drag Race, and one of them was like, "Let me help you pack." Like, here you go, boom, boom, boom. But
Yeah, I mean,
did.
New York is definitely a very specific situation, and it's not for everyone. Fortunately, and now, especially with the digital age, people can work from all sorts of physical locations and still make that career connection happen. Occasionally you will need to come into a city just to network and to get caught up to speed with how the industry is moving in your area. But yeah, I mean, here I am. So it's been, a lot of decades and still loving New York in spite of our pandemic. You still have to love her through the pandemic and believe we will all come back on the other side of this with some changes. But, the human spirit is very hard to, hold down.
Yeah. So Professor P, Professor B Way, excuse me.
Yes.
You had said something really important that I had to write down. And I hope I'm interpreting this correctly, that although New York is the fashion capital, due to digital technology, you could still be successful in the fashion world and connect with the New York market and be outside of the New York market as long as you're networking every
absolutely.
now and then for trips.
I mean, you'll come into town for different conventions like during Fashion Week. If you're truly involved with fashion as an industry, you'll want to be in town because that's where people fly in from all over the world, and that's where you get your social network going, your professional and social networks going. Because everyone's here and everyone is constantly hunting talent, whether the talent is the next gorgeous model who's going to light the fashion world up, or the next designer, the next photographer, illustrator, stylist. I mean, they're just hair, makeup. I mean, look how Pat McGrath has conquered the world of makeup. I mean, she is at the absolute pinnacle. I mean, she just rose there like a rocket. And I mean, she just knows her stuff, and everybody says it could not have happened to a more deserving talent.
Wow. Okay, so let's get into fashion illustration. When you got to Parsons, is that what you majored in? Let's talk about
this was in the 80s when there was still a lot of fashion illustration available in newspapers, for stores and magazines, but it ended up drying up very, very quickly, because once the models became celebrities, and they were known by their face, by their name, by their story, by their history. So they became as identifiable as a movie star or a pop star or a singer or a dancer. So once the models became celebrities, people just wanted to look at photographs of those superstar models. And, the tradition of fashion illustration has been the illustrator creates their own kind of character that they draw, but it's very hard to compete with the celebrity machine, as you well know, because Hollywood has a lot of money and a lot of power to push these famous faces onto the public and dazzle them. And once they get the photographic image of the models, a drawing of kind of an anonymous person the illustrator may have developed, it just can't compete. And, photography had the technology of reproduction in newspapers and magazines had escalated and had gotten much more refined. So the photographs printed were of a higher quality in the printed press. So in the early days of illustration, we're going back to like the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, reproduction in magazines and newspapers was still a little dicey. So for instance, to advertise a black dress, an artist who would render it with various shades of gray to pull out all the details, it would reproduce much more richly. And if you were to make a photograph of that, it would just look like a silhouette of the dress. So you'd get the silhouette, but none of the details.
Got you.
So
Okay.
that's a little bit of the history. And so now I tell the students the place where fashion illustration exists would be in the fashion design studios. Because until a garment has been sewn and ready to go to the camera, it needs to be drawn up because it doesn't exist. But the minute it exists, it gets photographed, preferably on a recognizable model, and then it moves out into the world to promote it.
Wonderful. And I've heard stories of this relationship between a fashion illustrator and the designer. Like I just watched is Halston's
Yes, Joe
thing
Eula,
and how
Joe
in
Eula.
love, yeah, he was with his
Yes.
illustrator and how critical the illustrator was to helping him develop his ideas.
Absolutely. Well, every artist who draws has a certain way they draw and a certain kind of women they may draw, a certain kind of character. And if it clicks with the designer, boy, that's like heaven. Because now the designer's vision is so clearly fleshed out before the actual dress gets made and put on a human being. The drawings really communicates to the audience the designer is trying to reach within the industry, like the buyers and the editors, to show them what's coming up. So these are all sketches, sketches, sketches. Now, of course, a lot of the sketches are done digitally online with Illustrator and on iPads. But nonetheless, until something is made, sketches are how it gets communicated. And now
So
they can cut and paste actual fabric swatches. So the fabric isn't even so hand rendered anymore like it used to be, like it's collaged in. So whoever's looking at it gets a much clearer idea of what it's going to be before it exists in reality.
you're making me think, Professor B-Way, like that with the illustration, the technology, with 3D modeling, like when you
Yes.
said the fabric, you were beginning to make me think that they're going to be able to 3D model
Yes,
clothing.
absolutely. Yes, 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 yes. But it seems like in the world of high fashion, which is at the haute couture and the high designer level, there's still a lot of hand drawing just to create this work that has that art basis. And a lot of the mass market brands may use many more computer digital tools in their quick turnaround, because their development of their ideas are not quite as artistic and maybe not quite as fast. Whereas, the mass market people are just repeating a lot of what they did last season, just in a new fabric and a new color, changing things very little just to keep the product out there. So the digital world really comes in handy there because they're not even trying to be artistic. Whereas if you look at like the house of Schiaparelli with the American designer Daniel Roseberry from Texas, for the house of Schiaparelli, there's a wonderful clip on YouTube where he is drawing these big, gorgeous illustrations, and that's how he sees the mood and that's how he communicates. Now, drawing is a very specific thing. Not everybody is able, not every designer is able to have that concrete image that they can just draw it and it's what they want. A lot of designers cannot do that. The only way they can start is get their hands on the fabric that inspires them for the season and drape it on the dress form. That's the only way they can even get a sense of where they want to go with draping, and it's like soft sculpture. But there's a whole group of designers that can imagine it, and they're very clear on the fit of a jacket, the look of a skirt, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I did want to show the students because, we have some of our students that are 9 years old, and I'm not sure if they can even, relate to the concept of what a fashion illustrator is. So for our younger students, this is Professor B-Way's website. And this is all of his work. Some of it.
All different kinds. We have shoes, accessories, portraits, women's style, men's style. We have all these accessories.
I love it. I absolutely love it. And as students, as Professor B-Way was mentioning, fashion illustration was at a higher priority when it came to publications, printing publications, because the fashion illustration could capture the color and the shading. However, as photography, printing got better, right, Professor
Yes,
Bway?
yes,
Photography took over in addition to the supermodel era and supermodels now being the face of fashion or being more important, really,
yes,
than the clothing itself.
absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Let me go ahead
Yeah.
and click out of here. So then my next question is, with someone wanting to major in fashion illustration, you teaching fashion illustration, and you mentioning that there's a small market for it now for
Well, let's just say all my students are studying fashion design. I
okay.
teach fashion design students and I help them get their drawings to a place where they can communicate before the garment is made up. So as I said before, until it's made, the only way to communicate it is through some sort of drawing with swatches of fabric and notes. And then the research that you have done to get to that idea, like what did you look at, And so that whole process of going from research to sketch and get it all ready up until you're able to hand the sketch over to a seamstress or a tailor who then will know enough of what you want that it gets made in muslin first and then fabric after.
Okay, we do have a question for you, Professor Bway.
Yes.
How do you feel about the program COL Virtual Fashion Design? And do you think that fashion is going to continue using VR and virtual programs for fashion in the long run?
Oh, I think there's room for all kinds of technology. Like I said, there are smaller houses that are more, rooted in the art of all of it, like all the stages. So there's a lot of handwork that's welcome in just the mood of how a company is built and set up. And then there are, companies that like a much more digital presentation. So, it's big enough. You have a whole world. I mean, we're talking about a planet of people that love clothes and shoes and bags and everything else. So clothing is hardly going to ever take a backseat. And now that we are, at least in New York, we're being encouraged to mix a little bit more and leave our nests and come out and go out, and socialize. I've been to a few social gallery events in the recent months, and people are so excited about dressing up again and looking at others who are dressed up. I mean, this is always a big part of New York society and New York socializing. And, people were starved for that for the 15 to 17 months. We were like unplugged from that and just doing Zoom with, little t-shirts and sweatpants.
Right.
So, you can absolutely feel it. And the joy of just seeing people enjoy dressing up again and expressing their individuality, mixing things up in such incredible ways, which is really what makes contemporary fashion so special is, everyone is mixing menswear with women's wear, vintage with contemporary. I mean, it's just like
no rules.
Create something that's your own, and now you're creating your own composition and your own identity. So that's been a lot of fun to see, people getting back into the social swirl. But, we still have to be really careful. I mean, there are a lot of states where, it hasn't been so great. And now with the Delta variant, people really are still concerned, and rightfully so, because it's also had some devastating effects. So I visited Atlanta, just a brief drive through, and then I went to Savannah, though a former colleague is the head of fashion design at SCAD.
Okay.
In Savannah, where Bria is a student.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I also wanted to mention this whole idea of modeling is we're going through an extraordinary time where suddenly the possibilities are physically present that wasn't present before. And it's just, it's a little bit startling that why didn't this happen sooner in terms of inclusivity and diversity. Like, you wonder, why did it take so long? I'm really happy that it's happening now, but it makes you wonder.
I think there's certain people in the room now. There's certain
absolutely, but it took Well, I know the coalition formed by Beth Ann Hardison,
Yes.
the former model from the 60s, and Iman and Naomi
And
Campbell.
mhm,
They formed this
Black
like a
models.
radical club, and they just would not shut down. They would not be shut down. And they kept speaking and speaking and speaking, not out of hostility, but definitely not shutting down. So it eventually broke. You know, sometimes that's what it takes. I mean, these are these movements. I mean, we're living through so many different movements of helping people achieve their personal freedom, that it's just extraordinary. Yeah.
I'm thankful for it too, not only from diversity and inclusion from a color perspective, from a size perspective, no
Yes.
longer
Yes.
forcing us to be bulimic. We
Yes.
can
Yes.
eat now.
And be fabulous. Now and be fabulous, you know?
Yes, and then
Yeah.
just from the handicap group, you know, you're now seeing models in wheelchairs, you're seeing models just all kinds, all
Yeah,
walks
well,
of
I
life.
think it just had to do with people realizing that everybody has self-esteem and everybody has a right to feel their best. Whether or not they're like everybody else, it doesn't matter. Like you have that basic human right and privilege to be helped to reach your best moment. So then
Absolutely.
that becomes a great equalizer, even though visually, you know, people are very different. And I hope that continues, because it'd be a shame if everybody turned into one person, the same person. That would not work either.
That'd be
So you want that you want the diversity, like you want to be able to say, wow, look at how that individual is expressing themselves. Yeah, I mean, I see women in those electric wheelchairs in the streets of New York, and I've seen them for years, just racing down the street, and you know, they obviously have physical challenges, but I can see that, you know, somebody, whoever dresses them, has put their foot into a high heel boot, and I just
nice.
think,
Okay.
and I'm saying that's how she wants to project her character, because she's giving you, I'm sexy and I'm
Yeah.
feeling it. And it
Mhm.
doesn't matter that my body is completely not, you know, the ideal that the magazines tell you about. But, you know, she's dressed, she's got her lipstick on, she's got her hair all done up. And I think that is just incredible. I mean, the strength it would take, this was not possible in another time when a lot of people who were physically handicapped were shut-ins, right? It's like the family would lock them up for fear of people pointing and being mean and unpleasant. They would protect them in their homes. They barely saw the light of day, maybe the backyard, and that was it. But
Well,
now,
now we're all out. Express yourself, right? So let me ask you this. Being that you've been a fashion illustrator, you just pointed out to me that you focus on you're a fashion design professor
teaching,
as
yes,
well.
yes.
Have you tapped into fashion design as Steven Broadway?
I have definitely had clothing made for myself, but it hasn't turned into like a fashion line per se, because that, you know, that is so involved and so complicated. However, all the designers that I have worked with and sketched for, because they didn't have the drawing skills, something in the way I drew whatever they were communicating to me verbally, and they loved it. So I have been unconsciously also designing alongside them on a whole other level that's very deep.
Wow.
And one of my greatest joys is to meet with the designer who does not have the drawing skills, but they need somebody to sketch for them, like Joe Eula and Halston. Although Halston drew pretty well himself, but it's meeting the person, sitting down with them. They show me all the things they're inspired by, pictures. We talk about movies, music, celebrities,
Wow.
and then I start sketching. And I mean, I have to make this thing on paper that they're going to look at and say, wow, you nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge of that, you know, could be a little intimidating, because each individual person has something so specific that they consider beautiful. It's like, how can you nail that? Because you don't know what they're thinking of. They can guide you. So I have loved jobs like that where I sketch somebody's idea, and it's like you show it to them and they're like, that's it. It's so much more than I was even, aiming for.
Mhm.
So it's like reading between the lines, being very sensitive to their communication and picking up on things that they may not even verbally express.
Wow, wow, wow.
I
Isn't that
love
something?
that.
Yeah, like having a teacher and a guide that can know, like you could tap into your energy maybe, and as you're drawing,
Yes,
you're like
absolutely. And I feel
feeling.
that way with many of my students who are, many
Mhm.
times struggling with drawing because it's something that they're in a classroom to improve. But just listening to them and getting a sense of, getting them to show me all the different things that inspires them and then how they can achieve a drawing with those elements in a way that they can do it,
Mhm.
which may be not in a classical drawing sense, but my job is to help them with what they can do. And that has been amazing.
Mhm. So let's talk about COVID. What has COVID done for you? There's a lot of
Well,
spiritual things.
what it has done for me, first of all, early on, like I remember, I'll never forget, it was Friday, March 13th, 2020, that we went into lockdown. Friday the 13th, I was ready to go teach my class at Parsons that morning. It was Friday. And I was ready to teach my classes on Saturday at FIT and Sunday at FIT. So Thursday night, the alerts came in from the school saying classes canceled, stay in, stay safe until further notice. So at first, you know, people were thinking like it's a week, maybe 2 weeks. Everyone was running around like going camping. You get all your stuff, you get all your supplies, and now we're going to like be inside for a while. Well, who knew it was going to be 17 months?
Mm.
But what I used that time, among the things that I ended up really getting into was cooking like I never ever did before. And then browsing through all the extraordinary cooking lessons on YouTube from regular people, not just, Martha Stewart and all the stars of culinary. But oh my God, that was incredible because we were still allowed to go to the grocery store.
Mhm.
And so and baking, it's like I never baked so many desserts. It
Okay.
was like I got all into it and I discovered Trader Joe's, which I never ever went into. It's down a few blocks from where I am. I was
They're
going to
awesome. Yeah.
D'Agostino's, which was much closer. But I noticed Trader Joe's has all these in-house brand like Trader Joe, like that Trader Joe banana bread that box is incredible.
Trader
So
Joe's orange chicken. Yeah, all of their
yes,
little
yes.
things.
Oh,
Yes.
unbelievable, unbelievable. So cooking was that, and then and then when I, and then I got on my bicycle a lot. Like I know there were different times the news would present, different disturbances happening in different neighborhoods in Manhattan. And so I was flabbergasted. I couldn't believe it. So then I would hop on my bike in the evening and ride down and then see for myself that, there were some issues happening. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, COVID has been, in that regard, it gave you a lot of time for self-reflection.
Mhm.
And it's like shopping just came to a halt. I mean, I was somebody that was always on the lookout for interesting things for the home, interesting things to wear, and also to bring to the classroom for my teaching. So
Mhm.
that came to a halt, and I thought, wow, I have never
Wow.
gone so long without really shopping so much. I did a little bit, but it was cut down by a lot.
Got
Like
you.
all my art books and everything that I use for research and reference and then bring to the classroom. But I was able to, hold the book open, not just do PowerPoint, but hold the book open and show them the book design and then all the
Mm.
content.
Mhm.
Was
Mhm.
very, very
Mhm.
cool. Yeah.
All right. Well, awesome. Well, I'm glad you were able to improve on your cooking and your baking
Oh,
skills.
unbelievable.
I'm sure your
Unbelievable.
tribe is going to benefit from that. Okay, so to wrap it up, I have two more questions for you, Professor B. Wade.
Yes.
So, for upcoming fashion designers, any tips that you have for upcoming fashion designers?
Well, the skill sets that they need to start exploring, which could be as early as, you said your youngest student is 9.
Yes.
I've had students who were taught how to knit at age 6. And so I would say sewing, knitting is great. If anybody in your family or community or part of your relatives does that, because they come from a time when they were taught that by their parents, I would jump on that. Of course, know your digital skills, get onto Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign, so you become familiar with that. And then, draping and pattern making, which kind of goes together. Draping is taking fabric and creating a soft sculpture on a dress form. And then pattern making is turning that 3-dimensional sculpture into flat pieces. But a good way to learn about flat pieces or pattern pieces is to go to your local thrift shop and for very little money, buy a few basic items of clothing like white men's shirts or a simple skirt, and then take it apart at the seams. Don't cut into the fabric. You only cut where the seams are. And as many seams as that garment has, just take it apart and appreciate the jigsaw puzzle effect of how clothing is put together to form around the body. And that's such an education. So that I would definitely encourage. And also, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Oprah's. I can never, ever get tired of listening to her wisdom. Just be comfortable with accepting your instincts, which may be different from somebody else's instincts. And it's like, listen to your gut. I think it's smart to listen to different people who, with all good intention, are there to guide you by suggesting this, that, or the other. But you have to be comfortable with making the final decision, no matter which way it goes. I love Oprah for saying there are times when we are going to feel like we made a mistake, but she's interpreting that as it's not really a mistake. It's the universe's way of telling you that that was the wrong direction and that you need to search and find a better track. That's why there was that interruption. But at that time, when something like that happens, you're going to naturally feel badly because everybody wants to succeed constantly, which is not humanly possible. I mean, the greatest of the greatest of the greatest have had such monumental failures, but they learn from those failures, and then you just move your needle to this way and go north by northeast or wherever it is, just keep moving in a better direction for you. So I think that's important. I just wanted to show a few drawings that I've been doing lately.
Absolutely, we would love to see them.
Yeah, so these are drawings of faces that I've done.
Beautiful, I love it. It's gorgeous.
And it's like when I live in New York, because I live in New York, I get exposed to faces from every single corner of the world.
Wow, look at that.
And every kind of personality.
Look at that. Look at that.
It's like, so part of the drawing for me has been to be in a place where there are all kinds of people expressing themselves in all kinds of ways.
Gorgeous.
And to not just look at pictures of them on your little Instagram scroll, but to actually be around them, be on the street, be at social events, be in school. And, being in fashion school, you get the kids who are really, loving and rocking their fashion.
Yes.
So this was
wow,
an Indian, like almost like a bride with all
this is real people that you're drawing.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And then these are some more fashion.
Beautiful. So if someone wanted to hire you to,
yes.
Okay.
Awesome. Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. Wonderful.
Yeah, they would just get in touch with me through my website. And last but not least, I wanted to show you my most ultimate favorite runway model. She was a huge star in the 80s and 90s, but she died very young under really mysterious circumstances in Paris. She was from Guinea in Africa, but she became a star in Paris. Her name is Katusha Neon.
I feel like Katusha, I know that name.
Yes, because
Katusha.
you're in the modeling game. Katusha
Yeah.
Neon is
Wow.
she was Yves Saint Laurent's one of his most favorite
Main.
muses.
Mm-hmm.
And here she is in Ungaro.
Wow.
But I mean, look at that dress. It just looks like a dessert, doesn't it?
It does. It absolutely does. It does.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
Katusha has been so incredibly inspiring, and you can find lots of videos on her doing her runway work.
Uh-huh.
And it's the movement, and also Yves Saint Laurent was so in love with women from Africa because he was born in Algeria. So he grew up, though he was French, he grew up looking at all these brown-skinned beauties. And I mean, the minute he got his brand and he was able to cast it and get his girls on there, he just grabbed those girls up from Africa.
Oh my
Because he said nobody else had that physical attitude. And he really talked about how they held their heads and their walk. And it was like they were not even trying to be models. They just walked with this kind of confidence and this air that was very elegant. So, I mean, people are much more, conversation about diversity, but Yves Saint Laurent really broke into that in the 60s and certainly by the 70s when he became the star of Paris. He had that model from Martinique, Munya, that became his star model. So I'm sure your students will have fun researching Katusha and watching all of the videos of her modeling for Christian Lacroix and Gianfranco Ferré and Saint Laurent. Unbelievable.
Thank you for that, Professor B. Wade. We'll definitely be on Katusha next week. We'll definitely do a deep dive on her. And
you have to. Yeah.
And
she also, but it's also interesting because she wrote this book that was very controversial, exposing some practices in African countries that she was very not supporting. And so people feel her death was somewhat tied into that. God. So, it's like there've been others who have spoken up about things that a lot of people are like, you should not be bringing that into conversation. But, so it's very interesting if you want to also look at that part of her, because while she was a very successful model with the top designers, she also had personal experience within the African culture that she was raised in. And she felt she had to talk about this, but many people still believe that it did not end well for her, and had she kept it quiet. But sometimes you just can't keep quiet, right?
You can't. So she was an activist. She was looking out
absolutely
for the other girls in her tribe that are probably getting. I'm sure it's the mutilation that happens to young African girls.
Yep, that was exactly what it was about. And she's like, somebody has to talk about this. But at that point, she had reached such a platform that she was so successful and identifiable. And this is what happens when somebody has achieved a platform. They can shine something on a situation that a lot of people would be like, it's probably better if you don't bring that up.
Because Oprah, speaking of Oprah, she did something on that,
Absolutely.
Years ago. I literally was crying, like looking
Yes, of course. I mean, you can't understand this, but there are still parts of the world that are, for lack of a better word, still way back in time, where men for the most part are really trying to control women's lives in a really physically brutal way. And it's like, it's better to know than not know. So then you're informed. I think informed is better than not being informed, even though it may not always be the most pleasant news. Well, I'm glad that we're both fans of Oprah.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Oprah. Like,
well, it's like I feel she's like this teacher to the world. Like she's just this teacher to the world. She's so unique. Like, and people have this
pure. She kept it pure. She kept it pure and honest. That was to me, that's where she was coming from, because I think she had a guest on stage that said they were addicted to crack or something, and she had to say, look, I tried it. So the fact that she broke that, I said, you know what?
This and also the fact that she is so blunt about sharing her childhood traumas. And, she's not going to wait for someone to unearth something and say, oh, Oprah, we got you. You were hiding this thing. She's like, boom, I said it first. I put it on the table. And that's how you own a lot of your trauma, is by laying it out and putting it on the table so nobody can hold that over you. And so you're incredibly free. You're like, guess what? I talked about it last year. This is old news.
Right. Just like Barack said, I smoked in college. This is old news. There's nothing you have on me.
Yes. Didn't you get that lecture? I did it 5 years ago. That's so old already. It's so 5 seasons ago. Yeah. Have you watched Pose on Netflix? Do you know that show?
Yes, I have watched it. Yes. I haven't watched
talk about unearthing all kinds of stuff that leaves you a little bit like, oh, no, they didn't go there. Well, they went there because it's, the honesty, I think, ultimately is good.
It's time.
Ultimately, I think it's really good.
It is.
It helps more people than it hurts.
It helps with understanding. It shows that it's just human nature.
Yes, and what people have overcome, because just the actress Dominique, who plays Electra, her own story. I mean, it's incredible that you have cast women who have experienced that life, who are now portraying women who lived that life. So you can't get more authentic. It's even not like they're feeding somebody a script and they don't know at all what you're talking about. So absolutely. I'm glad you're watching that.
Oh, I'm watching it all. I'm watching it all.
Well, I hope this won't be the last time that we connect.
Absolutely. It will not be, Professor B. Wade.
Yes.
Thank you so much for
all. If you ever get to New York, please come by the schools. I'll be happy to give you a tour. Or to any of your students, if they find themselves coming up to New York, they can send me an email and maybe visit the school and see how college is, today, now that we're going back in the fall. So we're in the classroom again.
Okay, well, wonderful. Well, thank you, Professor B. Wade, for being an amazing guest. And thank you to my audience that are still tuned in with us. Thank you so much for tuning in to Model Talk Tuesdays. We'll have another guest next week. And you students, you heard Professor B. Wade. So when we get to New York, we'll get a visit to Parsons. So all right, everyone, we will see you next week for another edition. And thank you again, Professor.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.
So do I just exit?
Yep, you can just go ahead and exit.
Okay. Thank you again, Pearl. Really lovely.
Yes, wait, hold on one second.